Well, good morning, class. Welcome to the Unit 5 review, and I'm just going to go through a few things today that'll hopefully wrap up Unit 5. And on your Remind account, you should have received I sent the entire Unit 5 packet. I know you already have part of it because I was going to release it in increments, but couldn't figure out how to do that, so we're just going to go ahead and, we're just going to try it like this. So we pretty much left off spring break wise looking at Unit 5, and I believe it was point 2. Let me find my clicker here. I left it over here. Hang on. Here we go. We were talking about the French Revolution, and hopefully by now you have watched the rest of the French Revolution video and filled in the rest of those blanks. So, but just as a reminder, just kind of a recap here again, and I hope you can see this. If not, I can definitely send this out to you. Maybe if I'll scoot this up just a tad, and give me a second to kind of line that up. Here we go. So you remember in the French Revolution, the idea was to establish liberty, equality, and fraternity. Remember, this is from the Enlightenment. France was poor after so many years, and remember there were three different estates. There was the first estate, which was your clergy, your second estate, which was your nobility. Combined, that was about 3% of the population. And then everybody else made up 97% of the population. Remember, originally they had wanted to have a constitutional monarchy, but that's just not enough for the National Assembly. July 14th, 1789, you remember they stormed the Bastille. And then they abolished all relics of feudalism, established the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and then later on, under the French Republic, they under the Reign of Terror, you can remember so many people were beheaded. Even if they were suspected of supporting the monarchy in any way, they were dealt with. Thousands who opposed the revolution, and then of course in 1793, King Louis XVI was beheaded, and then later on that year, Marie Antoinette was as well. So what you have after that is a long period of turmoil, as the video said at the end, until France's leadership would be concentrated in the hands of only one man, and that of course was Napoleon Bonaparte, who took control and made himself the Emperor of France. Now there's a lot of things you can look at online which will talk a little bit more about Napoleon, but since this is AP World History, we want to go with the big picture of things. How does that fit into the other revolutions? We've already looked at the American Revolution. Now we have the French, and often what you'll see is a comparison between that and this next revolution, which I'm going to put up here, and that is the Haitian Revolution. Remember, you can pause this video if you need to take notes or anything like that. So let's look at the Haitian Revolution now, and it was encouraged by the American and French revolutions, where slaves started to rise up against their masters. Toussaint Louverture is, if you ever have to write an essay about this is the guy you need to talk about right here. He was a Haitian who was very well versed in the Enlightenment, and he joined the rebellion against the slavery. The enslaved Africans and a group of escaped slaves who were already in the Caribbean, called the Maroons, established an independent government. 1801, Louverture produced the Haitian Constitution that gave all people equality and citizenship, and he declares himself governor for life. He split plantations between former slaves and free black people, and then in 1803 he was imprisoned by the French, and that's when he died as well. Louverture was succeeded by a guy named Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who declared Haiti a permanently independent republic. It is the first country in Latin America to actually win independence. So that's pretty significant. It's the first black-led country in the Western Hemisphere, and it is the only country to be permanently independent as a result of a slave uprising. Now, over here you can see I've got a little comparison chart about the French versus the Haitian revolutions. What is the difference? What are the similarities? Well, here are the similarities. Both were encouraged by the Enlightenment ideas that said that all men have natural rights. And since we're talking about slavery, that makes sense. And all of them were restricted by social classes. You can see Haiti, which kind of was a French colony, were both restricted by social classes. Now, but in Haiti, it was actually led by slaves that actually had zero rights prior to the revolutions, whereas in France, those people did have rights, although very, very limited. It wasn't the fact that they didn't have rights, it was the fact that they did not have a voice in their own government. So just keep that in mind. But both are encouraged by the Enlightenment. That's your biggest common denominator between all of these. So there's actually a fourth group that I want to go into really quick, and that is the Creole revolutions in Latin America. Here are some definitions that I know will be in your packet, and hopefully you can see these. If you can't, please comment below and I can do another video that shows just this slideshow presentation. The Peninsulares are born in Spain. The Creoles are born of European ancestry in the Americas. Mestizos are born of European and Indian parents, and your mulattoes, which are African and either European or indigenous populations. Make sure you can differentiate between these four groups. Now the Creoles, the one that are born of European ancestry, they owned business and they were upset with Spain's mercantilist policies. Both Creoles and Mestizos wanted more political power, and they resented the status of the Peninsulares. So here is a chart. It's not a very good one, but up here you have the Peninsulares, the Creoles, Mestizos, mulattoes, Africans, and then Native Americans. So in a way, that's kind of their estate system, if you will. Bolivar revolutions. This was the desire for independence that grew amongst the Creole class first. The Creoles are right here. They did not want help from the masses. That means the mestizos, the indigenous, and the mulattoes, because of what happened in Haiti. So Simon Bolivar, was very rich, and he was well versed in the Enlightenment ideas. Once again, here is your common denominator of Enlightenment. He was a talented war general who fought against Spain. He wrote something called the Jamaica Letter. Don't be surprised if you don't see that as a DBQ at some point. And the Jamaica Letter was aimed at rich Creoles, trying to get them to join the cause. It rejected the ideas of mercantilism, meaning that we should not be economically interdependent on other places. And also he wanted reform, which outlined a lot of liberal ideas. Not liberal in the sense that we know, but liberal in that things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, things like that. Those are you often see called liberal ideas. He established the Gran Colombia, which, in other words, he wanted this to be a lot like the United States. But in the Gran Colombia, what you see is wars are very expensive, and Latin America does suffer. Armies start being loyal to the Caudillos, and the Caudillos are strong local leaders who resisted democratic ideas and the rule of law. It's kind of weird. I don't have my Hispanic-speaking students trying to correct my pronunciations in here, and you know who you are. So I'm doing the best I can. So anyway, as you can see, the Enlightenment fuels so many different revolutions, and these are just a couple of examples of those. Here are some results of the Creole revolutions. Let me stand out so you can see this. New constitutions and governments were established in Latin America, but things weren't super changed, because you still saw, and to some extent you still see this today, a social hierarchy. And even though slavery was ended, non-Spanish speakers were still denied most rights. They were still discriminated against. The Creole class remains in the upper class, and it stays pretty conservatives. Unfortunately, since we talk about women's rights here, is that women gained very little in the Latin American revolutions. Here's a couple other people I want to introduce you to. This is Lola Rodriguez de Tio, who is a poet who critiqued Spain's rule over Puerto Rico and Cuba. Her writings encouraged Enlightenment ideas of equality and education, which leads to uprisings against Spain. Spain also controls the Philippines, where educational opportunities were limited. And here is where you see something interesting happen. Many young men go to study in Europe and were encouraged by Enlightenment ideas. So what does that mean? That means nationalism and republicanism all grow. And these are some things you can look up on your own. This is Jose Rizal, who led the propaganda movement. Now, propaganda is when you take an idea and you try to promote it using any means necessary. It could be fabrications, it could be exaggeration. You could probably compare him to Jean-Paul Marat in the French Revolution. I think that would be a pretty fair comparison. He was jailed and he was eventually killed, and people were shocked, and they rose up for real independence in 1896. So that is Rizal. So here's what's going on in Europe. This is also the time when people are completely unifying. Italy and Germany. And here's a couple of things that I'll just briefly go over. Italy, which up until this coronavirus outbreak, really didn't have a whole lot of problems. But in the 1880s, in Italy, which you see is the big boot country, it was divided into local kingdoms and city-states. Count Camillo di Cavour decided to unite them under the national identity of Italian. So using a concept known as realpolitik, which means practical politics, and Enlightenment ideas, he orchestrated a series of wars to weaken Austrian influence over the land. The Risorgimento, which is a movement led by Giuseppe Mazzini. Giuseppe, I love that name. That's actually an Italian derivation of the name Joseph. Combined Cavour's ideas, encouraged revolutionary fervor, and Italy was then unified. Now, Italy remains poor in the 19th centuries, and many immigrated to other countries. Meanwhile, Germany, now we're getting into some of my favorite stuff. Parts of what was once the Holy Roman Empire were now under French control. So, growing nationalism says this is bad. The leader of Prussia, now Prussia was the northern part of the empire. Today we would consider that northern Germany almost all the way over to Poland. His name was Otto von Bismarck, and he uses practical politics, realpolitik, to make Austria fight in 2 wars against Prussia, and France 1 war. He won all 3 of them. So nationalism grows and Prussia gains territory. After the Franco-Prussian War in 1871, which Germany wins, Bismarck establishes the Kingdom of Germany. And 1871 is the first year that the German kingdom, it's not a republic yet, the German kingdom is born. I guess you could even call this the Second Reich. In case you're ever wondering, what does Reich mean? It means empire. Germany and Italy both became new world powers, and what we see with all this growing nationalism is the seed that's eventually going to be planted that will become the First World War, or as it will become known at first, the Great War. So moving right along, you also see this happening in other areas. So let me take a couple others. That was Italy and Germany. Now let's look at the Balkan states. Now the Balkans are pretty much Eastern Europe. Now here's how I help my regular students identify the Balkan nations. The end in 2 letters, IA. You got Bosnia, Serbia, Yugoslavia. You've got Romania, Albania, Bulgaria. I call them the IAs. That's your Balkan nations, and they're mostly concentrated in Eastern Europe. The Ottoman Empire had controlled the Balkan region for a while, but in 1683 we start to see the beginning of the end. Austria and Eastern nations like Russia start to push back against the Ottomans. Remember, the Ottomans are your Muslim Turks. Balkan nationalism develops, and in 1827, after more contact with Western Enlightenment ideas, Greece worked with Great Britain, France, and Russia to assert independence from the Ottomans after 325 years. So in places like Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, the Ottoman Empire is losing control. It's the beginning of the end for them. Now their decline is going to last 3 centuries, and the final nail in their coffin is going to be in the Great War. As a response to the growing desires of Balkan nationalism and independence, the Ottoman Empire created Ottomanism. And that's a new unified Ottoman identity and state. It uses education to encourage Ottoman identity. Now, other ethnic groups don't like this. They don't want to be under Ottoman control. There are very unhappy people in the Ottoman Empire. And so what you're seeing in the Balkans, starting in about the mid to late 1800s, is nationalist movements grow. And with nationalist movements, it's more than just protests, folks. You're going to see assassinations, you're going to see intrigue, you're going to see all sorts of betrayals and many civil wars. So the Balkans are very much an unstable part of this of Europe and really in the world. Spoiler alert: World War I is going to begin as a result of the Ottomans and their interference in the Balkans. World War I is actually going to it's going to be fueled by events that occur in the Balkan regions, but we'll get to that in our next unit. So anyway, that's a quick review of topic 5.6. The next video is going to be unit 5.3 and 5.4 when we discuss the Industrial Revolution. So hope to see you in the next video.